All right. Thanks, Kate. And welcome everyone to the US Web Design System monthly call for January of 2025. Today, the USWDS logo is in midwinter blue for the start of the year. Slide 2. My name is Dan Williams, he, him, and I'm the USWDS project lead. And here on screen is my avatar: dark hair, blue sweater, collared shirt, glasses. Today, I'm wearing a dark orange shirt, black cardigan, and yellow socks, approximately USWDS Gold 30V. As Kate mentioned, we are recording this call, and I'm happy to say that we're able to share the recordings of these monthly calls publicly. You can find pretty much everything back to January 2023 on our website at designsystem.digital.gov/about/monthly-calls. We typically post videos shortly after the monthly call, and we also link out to the slides and the script hosted at Digitalgov. We've posted a link to our monthly calls page in the chat. We'll be posting other links and references into the chat as we go along, and today we're continuing something we've been doing the last few calls when it comes to chats and questions. Today in your Zoom window, you'll find a Q&A button in addition to a chat button, possibly under a More button. We'd like to encourage folks to ask questions in the Q&A section instead of the chat. Take a sec now to find the Q&A section and open it up. If any member of our team can answer your question in the Q&A section, we'll do so. Otherwise, there'll be some time for questions and answers at the end of the hour. But the chat's still nice too. Let's use the chat for introducing ourselves or for any other comments or discussion. Be sure to introduce yourself in the chat. It's nice to know who's here, and it's good to have you here today. For those of you who find that chat distracting, you're welcome to close or hide those discussions during the main presentation. You can reopen them later during the Q&A session at the end of this call. And one final note, that starting this year, really, we're going to try to end a couple minutes before the top of the hour to give folks at least a moment before they move on to the next thing in their day. So thanks. And with that, let's get started. Slide 3. So what's our agenda for today? Well, first, we'll check out a handful of product updates. And then we'll talk about the USWDS basics, why we're here, how to get started with USWDS code, and what's coming in 2025, which should also leave at least a little time for questions at the end. Slide 4. So let's just kick it off with a number of product updates. Slide 5. First, USWDS 3.12.0, our January USWDS release, which will be out next week. Slide 6. I've got 3 items to call out as notable updates in USWDS 3.12, what we expect to be our second to last release before a code freeze in February as we get ready to do some larger releases later in the year. So first, we added a minimum heading count for in-page navigation. This adds a setting to hide the nav when the content region doesn't contain a minimum number of headings. We also now will be allowing tooltips on non-button elements. So starting in USWDS 3.12, you can add a tooltip to an element like a link in addition to buttons. And finally, we resolved a vulnerability warning for unescaped strings. We found a warning in our code scanning related to passing unescaped strings in USWDS.js. This happened in a function responsible for getting the value of an ARIA property and converting that value into an array. This function does not interact with application content or user-submitted content, so we do not consider this an exploitable vulnerability. But we also realize that it can get flagged in code scanning, so we've updated this function in USWDS 3.12. And that's USWDS 3.12. Slide 7. We also published 4 new accessibility test pages this month. Those include Date Picker, Date Range Picker, Alert, and Site Alert. Next in the queue are some of our final accessibility test pages: Step Indicator, Card, Modal, and Range Slider, coming in February. Slide 8. We've also released a new version of USWDS for Designers, the repo that includes our design kit files. This new release, USWDS for Designers 3.0, now includes a .fig file for our USWDS design kit for Figma, allowing teams who cannot access the community file to download those assets directly from us. This is especially useful right now for teams that use Figma for government. Slide 9. There are two public discussions I'd like to highlight this month. The first is an active discussion about a star rating component. If you're interested in collecting this kind of user feedback or input, or have any other thoughts about star ratings, let's talk about it in this discussion. And we've also got a new accessibility discussion for January, where we hope to surface any new or old accessibility resources that our team should consider sharing on our website. Slide 10. And we're excited to tell you about the release of our first beta component in the USWDS Elements package. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. But as of right now, you can npm install at uswds/elements and see the USA Banner web component. So stay tuned for more on that later in this call. We also want to highlight two architectural decision records we've published recently. First is a short one documenting our decision to release elements as a single package rather than as one package per component. And the other is a little bit meatier and discusses our decision to build a USA Link component as a progressively enhanced HTML web component. Slide 11. And finally, I'd like to call out a new requirement in our USWDS repos for anyone who wants to contribute to the project. We now require signed commits for consideration. Signed commits use a unique key to identify a specific computer with a specific GitHub user, and it's one of the ways we can improve the security and transparency of our code base. We've added some links to GitHub resources related to setting up code signing in our contributing.md file in our repo, which we're linking to here. It can take a little bit of time to set up code signing, but it's worth it. Without signed commits, we can't accept work into our repos. And it's worth mentioning that commits authored within the GitHub web interface are signed by default, so that can be an option for a certain type of contribution. So reach out to us on Slack or by email if you're having any trouble with this requirement or have any other questions about it. And that's it for this month's product updates. Slide 12. So since it's January and we expect a lot of folks to be interested in USWDS this year, as we all get more familiar with M2322 and the federal website standards, we'd like to spend some time covering USWDS basics, why we're here, how to get started with USWDS, and what's coming in 2025 for the design system. Slide 13. So to that end, let me introduce Ann Peterson, our USWDS Experience Design Lead. Ann, can you introduce yourself and give a quick self-description for anyone audio only?
Thanks, Dan. I'm Anne. My pronouns are they, them. And visually, I'm white with short brown hair. The front's a bit mussy and the sides very short, with small glasses and headphones in a blue shirt.
Slide 14. Thanks, Ann. I'd also like to introduce Matt Henry, our USWDS Engineering Lead. Matt, can you introduce yourself and give a quick self-description for anyone audio only?
Sure thing. Thanks, Dan. Hey, y'all. It's Matt. I'm a white man with a white beard and transparent glasses. Today, I'm wearing an orange beanie and a cozy gray sweater and plaid shirt.
Great. Thank you, Matt. So first, I'd like to pass it to Ann so we can get into it with why we're here. Why use USWDS in the first place?
Slide 15. Thanks, Dan. This is Anne. So why use USWDS? So maybe you've been told you must use it, or that you should, or maybe you're just interested. You may even already use it. Thanks for being here. Whichever is the case, USWDS is a toolkit of principles, guidance, and code for designing and building familiar, accessible, compliant websites and digital services. To explain how a design system like USWDS does this, we're going to step back. Slide 16. Or a lot back, way back, to the cold vastness of space. Slide 17. If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Carl Sagan said that. Slide 18. And starting from scratch can be difficult work for any team. Slide 19. Often, one of the biggest obstacles to solving a problem isn't too many constraints, like those kind of implied by the rigid grid of squares we see here, slide 20. It's too few. See the cold vastness of space. Slide 21. When we researched how designers and developers work together, we heard again and again, I work better with a box of constraints. The constraints help me keep track of everything. Slide 22. And you've got this small set of building blocks. Once those are established, it's so easy to build. Slide 23. So these building blocks of design, these useful constraints, define a common frame and language for design decisions, usually in the form of principles, guidance, and code, just like in USWDS. These are the elements of a design system, a tool for supporting design and development problem solving at scale. Slide 24. You can think of a design system as a hardware store for websites and digital products. Slide 25, where a typical hardware store provides what you need to build physical things like paint, lumber, doors, cabinets, smoke detectors, and sinks. A design system provides, among other things, color palettes, buttons, headers, form inputs, alerts, and icons. Slide 26. Because not only are things like buttons and icons the building blocks of websites and digital services, they are, in a practical sense, solved problems. We know, in general, what makes a good button and how to build one. We know, in general, what makes a good icon and how to build one or find one. Slide 27. So a design system provides a collection of these solved problems to help teams focus your time, energy, and resources on high-value, unsolved problems, problems that really matter to your audience, the people using the sites and services you build. So we help teams work faster and go farther, slide 28, to not only build for your mission, your agency, and your audience, but by doing so, grow and scale our shared knowledge of solutions and best practices. USWDS is a tool to share, improve, and record what we know so the next team can go farther, and the team after that farther still. Slide 29. So that together we all contribute to the USWDS mission of shaping the future of government digital services. Slide 30. USWDS is driven toward empowered and supported digital service teams and familiar and easy to use digital services for the people who rely on them. That's our vision. Slide 31. We do this by helping government teams align, design, and keep their websites and services up to date. That's our Polestar. Slide 32. Today, USWDS is a proven product that started small but has been maturing and growing since 2015. Now, as a reminder, it's 2025. So we're entering our 10th year as a product. Slide 33. Over 500 websites use USWDS code, powering over 1 billion page views a month and 1 in 5 government sessions. Slide 34. These are sites like SSA.gov, the home of the U.S. Social Security Administration, slide 35, and VA.gov, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, slide 36. And for any site or product we build, we all need to be complying with our many legal requirements and responsibilities. Accessibility, of course, through Section 508, supporting the accessibility of digital products and services since 1998. As well as the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, which you'll hear as 21st Century IDEA, along with its supporting guidance here from OMB called Delivering a Digital First Public Experience, fondly called M2322 by those who work with it. But USWDS is a design system for the entirety of the federal government. So we build compliance with these laws, policies, and requirements into everything we provide. Slide 37. 21st Century IDEA and M2322 both cite federal website standards, which used to be hosted on the USWDS site, but now have their own independent subdomain and team. We talked with that team in last month's call, so check out the recording from December 2024. Or if you have questions, you can also email that team at website.standards@gsa.gov. USWDS and the Federal Website Standards team work together so USWDS can continue to provide the tools to support your work to comply with this law. USWDS is designed to save you time, thought, and frustration, to give you a great starting point to get in compliance and stay in compliance. Slide 38. Along with the support for compliance and beyond buttons and colors, we also provide consistency and a comprehensive common design language. Slide 39. That's grounded at the broadest level. We share principles, the basis of how and why we're working. Our 5 common principles are shared by teams across the federal government. The design system as a product works in the service of these principles, and the tools that we build are designed to help teams like yours also work in the service of these principles. So as a USWDS collective community, the principles we share are, slide 40, start with real user needs, earn trust, embrace accessibility, promote continuity, and listen. Slide 41. Once we're aligned on common principles, we can help teams design what folks actually need to do on government sites and services. These are interactions that sites exist to provide, or what we call patterns in the design system. Slide 42. USWDS has guidance for 17 common patterns, like providing a name, an address, a phone number, a social security number, among others. Slide 43. Every pattern includes a description and what problem they're meant to solve. Here's the address pattern to help people input their physical or mailing address. Slide 44. Patterns also include guidance on what to do and what not to do, informed by the experience of teams like yours. Slide 45. They include previews and templates like the physical address template we see here. Slide 46. And comprehensive usability guidance to lower barriers to usage. Slide 47. And patterns also include a list of the building blocks of the interaction, like the USWDS code for address, which includes checkbox, input mask, select, and text input. Now, these bits and pieces of websites, these building blocks of an interaction, are what we call components. Slide 48. These components are the primary code we deliver. Slide 49. We provide accessible, usable guidance and code for 48 common components like accordion, alert, date picker, language selector, modal, and search. Slide 50. Just like patterns, components have descriptions and previews, seen here for our text input component. Slide 51. They include code, HTML markup, to copy and adapt. This component code, plus the style sheets and JavaScript we deliver, are central to what developers need to get the component into their work. And this coming spring, we'll make this much easier with USWDS Elements, our web component-based version. Slide 52. But getting code into an application is only part of building. Our components come with complete usability guidance, including when to use the component, when to consider something else, and how to use it when you do use it. Slide 53. And how to test a component's accessibility, plus a changelog. Slide 54. Finally, in addition to principles, patterns, and components, we provide the building blocks of components themselves, the basics of common style we share between sites, which, again, builds consistency. These common palettes we call design tokens. Slide 55. Tokens are palette sets for every aspect of visual design, like color. We provide nearly 500 distinct colors in 24 color families. Slide 56. Spacing units in practical multiples of 4 pixels. Slide 57. Line height tokens, and more. 58. And to further support designing with USWDS, we now have a USWDS design kit for Figma available in beta at figma.com/community or our USWDS for Designers repo. Slide 59. Together, these common palettes, in addition to components, patterns, and principles, allow teams to spend less time choosing, less time fiddling, to get you prototyping, sharing, and ultimately improving faster. And we do all our work in the open, as an open source project that values community collaboration. That's slide 60. Slide 61. Through our public repositories on GitHub, found at github.com/USWDS, slide 62, and our community discussions at github.com/USWDS/USWDS/discussions, where you can browse questions and answers or start your own conversation about anything USWDS related. Slide 63. We also have a public Slack channel you can join through 18f.gov/chat. Slide 64. You can get the USWDS monthly newsletter by signing up on our website, designsystem.digital.gov. Slide 65. Or join the USWDS monthly public call on the third Thursday of every month. Visit the events section on digital.gov to sign up or find our slides, scripts, and videos. Slide 66. We can't do this alone. If we all work together, we could be a bit more like Archimedes and a bit less like Atlas, using a lever rather than each of us carrying the weight of the world. Using USWDS means being part of something bigger than any one team or even any one agency. It takes a lot to move the world, and we'd love to have your help shaping the future of government digital services.
Thanks, Anne. This is Dan again. So let's talk about getting started with USWDS. Slide 67. Slide 68. Questions we hear about getting started sometimes start out in a small voice, like, how do I add USWDS code to a project? Slide 69, which sometimes gets louder to, how do I just add the USWDS banner? Slide 70. And, lurking behind all of this sometimes is the unspoken, very loud voice of, how do I get started at all? Slide 71. Let's look at a demo of getting started with USWDS by adding the USWDS banner to a project step by step. All right, so let's install USWDS code into a project. We'll take it one step at a time. Installing, initializing, composing, and refining, adding USWDS to this very website that we're looking at here. We'll start with installing. So first, let's add USWDS and the USWDS compiler. We'll do this by installing the USWDS source code and compiler in a terminal window using a common package manager called npm. We'll do it with this command here. We'll bring it over to our terminal window and run that command. It'll take a little bit of a second to install this. It brings this down from the internet, brings it into our local environment, and installs it all here. So now we're going to add what's called a gulp file to create our compile settings. In this step, we're going to follow the instructions you can find in the USWDS compiler's README to add what's called a gulp file, instructions that tell the USWDS compiler how we'd like to use it. So today we'll create this gulp file with the touch command in the terminal. We'll do it with this little command here. And we'll bring it over to our terminal, add it. And there we have a new file called a gulp file. Now, it doesn't have anything in it yet. It's blank. So in a text editor, we're going to open this new gulp file we created and import the USWDS compiler package. This connects our gulp file to the USWDS compiler and its functions. We'll do this with a line of JavaScript. We'll take this JavaScript here. We'll bring it over to our text editor. In our text editor, we'll find this new gulp file and we'll paste it in. So now we want to set the proper USWDS version and other kinds of path settings for the compiler. We want to tell the compiler what version of USWDS to use and where to put its files. We're going to use a setting to tell the compiler to use USWDS 3. And we'll also use settings to tell the compiler where to save USWDS source files, and the CSS will compile. So today we'll set the destination of our USWDS theme files to the theme directory, and the destination of our other USWDS assets like CSS, fonts, images, and JavaScript to the assets USWDS directory. We'll do that with a bunch of these settings that we get from the instructions in USWDS compile. Bring them back to our gulp file. And there we are. So finally, we'll define the USWDS compile functions that we want to use. The USWDS compiler has a number of functions available. To use these functions, we need to export them in a format we document in that compiler's README. We'll use these two newly defined functions today, init and compile, when we run the compiler in the next parts. So after saving these functions, we can save and close the gulp file. So we'll grab those, bring them over to our gulp file, save it, and close it. All right. So now we've sort of set up our compiler and connected it to our project. Now we're going to initialize, and we'll set up USWDS theme files and assets. We'll do that by initializing our USWDS installation. Here we'll use settings and functions we set up in the last section to initialize USWDS. This process adds USWDS assets and theme files to our project and then compiles a USWDS style sheet. So we're going to use the init function we set up in the last step by running the npx gulp init command in the terminal. And this will copy these assets and compile the USWDS CSS. So grab that, come back to our terminal, we'll run this init, and it'll kind of do its thing. Copies some files, it compiles USWDS, and then it's all done. After the script runs, we have new USWDS assets in an assets USWDS directory, theme files in the theme directory, and compiled CSS in the assets USWDS CSS directory, just as we set it up in the gulp file. Now we're going to begin to kind of compose the assets. We want to add this USWDS CSS and JavaScript to our project templates. We're going to do that by adding the styles first to our site head. We're going to add a link to the compiled USWDS CSS before the existing site CSS in our project templates. Grab that. We'll come back over to our site's head, and we'll add it in right here. And now we're going to add this thing called the USWDS initializer to the site head. This adds an initialization script to our page that prevents flashes of unstyled content while USWDS is loading. So we're going to take this reference to this script, and we're going to put it in to our site head as well, right at the end. All right. And now we're going to add USWDS JavaScript to the end of the page body by adding our main USWDS JavaScript, uswds.min.js, to the end of the body with another script tag. So we're just going to go back into our project and make sure that our project includes USWDS in it. So down here at the end of the body, there's our script. So we've added USWDS styles and JavaScript to our project, but we don't see any changes to our site. This is because we've designed USWDS to keep its styles mostly to itself. In most cases, you won't see the effects of adding USWDS code until you intentionally add a USWDS component. So, which is what we're going to do now by adding the USWDS banner. So let's do that. Let's add the USWDS banner. So we want to get the USWDS banner HTML. And we'll do that over at the USWDS banner component page on the USWDS website. When we get there, we'll expand the component code accordion and copy that first section of markup from section to section. We'll bring it back to our project. So this is the USWDS website for the banner component. And we'll head down to component code. We'll grab this component here, section to section. And now we're going to add that into our markup here in this tutorial. So we're going to put it at the top of our default layout, just before the content. All right, so it's in. So now the banner's on our page. So let's just check it out in a new browser window. Come over here to again. And there it is. There's the banner at the top of our page. Ta-da. But wait a second. Let's go back there. It doesn't look right. There's no flag. The images are missing. Yeah, there's a problem here. That's because the image paths in our project are different from the image paths in the code we copied from the USWDS website, as many projects will be. So we want to just go and update those image paths to our actual project paths. So if we go back to our banner code, we're going to just replace all the instances of this broken path, assets IMG, with the project's actual USWDS image path, which is assets USWDS IMG, just using a find change. So we'll come back over here. We'll use a little find change. Okay, assets IMG, let's look for that. Let's replace it with assets USWDS IMG. Replace it. And resave. And that should be a little bit better. Once we've updated these image paths, our banner should look perfect. Let's go back and see. And there it is. We've got a flag, and we've got all of the images we expect to see in our banner. So now we're going to just refine our installation a little bit and customize USWDS settings. In this last section, we're going to kind of bring it all home and customize and optimize our installation. We're going to do this in a couple ways. First, we're going to activate some theme settings. We're going to add some custom USWDS settings to our project. To do this, we're going to add them to a custom settings file that our initializer added at theme uswdstheme.scss. So there's a comprehensive list of settings on the USWDS website at documentation/settings. But for now, we're just going to use a few of them to modify our installation by turning off noisy notifications. We're going to use public sans as our sans serif font. We're going to give our banner a dark gray background color and make the banner expand the full width of the page. And we can see this code here with these are the settings we're going to add. So we're going to do this in a file called USWDS theme. So grab this, come back over to our text editor. We can close this and this. And now we've got this theme directory with USWDS theme in it. It's got this code here that we're going to replace with our actual settings. And now we'll just recompile to see these changes. So we'll use the compile command that we set up earlier. We'll come back to our terminal, do another compile, and we can come back to our project. So now we've added this USWDS banner. We've changed some settings. Let's see. Oh, there they are. So now the banner is black. And it sort of starts at the side of the page as we intended. Great. All right, almost there. Now, we've added this, but the size of our compiled CSS is pretty large. It's over 500K. And that's because it contains every style for every component, every option, everything. We can greatly reduce this size by compiling only the banner CSS. So to do this, we're going to open up our theme's USWDS SAS entry point, the thing that tells the compiler what files to use. And we're going to replace the main USWDS package, this thing here, forward USWDS, with just the USA banner package. And that ought to make a big difference. So right here where it says USWDS, we want only to use the banner. All right, we'll compile again to see these changes. Come back here, run compile. We'll see that compile went a lot faster. It's less than a second. And also, after recompile, the CSS size drops down to 15K, less than 3% of the original size. It compiles in less than a second, and that's going to gzip down to 2K in a production environment. So now we have a project that uses USWDS code, includes the USWDS banner, and is optimized to use only the USWDS code it needs. And that is how you get started with USWDS code in a project. For a more in-depth version of this very tutorial, you can check out the USWDS tutorial repo at github.com/USWDS/USWDS tutorial. And we also have getting started resources for developers at designsystem.digital.gov/documentation/getting started for developers. So now I'd like to pass it to Matt to talk about USWDS in 2025.
Thanks, Dan. This is Matt. So, what does 2025 have in store for the design system? Slide 73. We know that adding USWDS to a site can take a few steps. Slide 74. If you're asking, how do I add USWDS code? The answer involves, as we just saw, installing, connecting, compiling, composing, and refining. Slide 75. It sounds like a lot. What if we had a simpler USWDS? What if we could get rid of the compiling, connecting, and refining and focus primarily on just installing and composing? Slide 76. And what if adding something like the USWDS banner to a site didn't involve almost 100 lines of HTML? So much you have to turn your computer on its side to read it all. Slide 77. What if banner markup was just one line with no compiling? Just opening and closing USA banner tags. No additional CSS, no Sass, just a couple tags and some JavaScript. Slide 78. This is what we'll deliver in spring 2025, a new simplified flavor of USWDS components called USWDS elements. We're starting small with just a few key components, mostly related to federal website standards, but we plan for USWDS elements to grow quickly alongside our existing code base. Slide 79. Who is USWDS elements best for? We expect that the USWDS elements version of our components will be best for teams with fewer design and development resources, teams that don't need as much customization, teams that want to reduce complexity, and teams just experimenting with USWDS. Slide 80. So I will pass it back to Dan to take a look at USWDS elements in action with a quick demo.
All right, this is Dan again. Thank you, Matt. Let's get into another demo. Okay. Now, let's install USWDS elements banner into a project. So with elements, we simply install and compose and we're done. So let's give it a shot on this very site. So we're going to start with installation again. Like first, we're going to add USWDS elements to our project by installing the US elements package. We're going to do this in a terminal window using a common package manager called npm with this command here. I'm going to grab this command. I'm going to head over to our terminal. And we're going to add that in. Now, npm is going to do its thing, grab this code, bring it down into our project, and there it is. All right, now let's compose. We're going to add the USWDS elements banner code to our project. So first, we're going to copy the JavaScript. So here we're going to move the newly installed USWDS elements JavaScript from the installation location, where npm put it, to our project directory. We're going to do this by creating a directory for this USWDS code in our project. We're going to use the make directory command in the terminal, but there are many ways to make a directory. So we're going to make a directory called assets USWDS.js in our project. Let's do that. Okay. There we've got this place. And now we're going to copy the files. For simplicity, using the terminal as before, but you can always just drag and drop. So we're going to copy things from where npm installed it over to this new directory. Okie dokie. So now we've just added the USWDS elements JavaScript to our new project directory. So now we just have to add a link to this code in our project template. So now let's add USWDS elements JavaScript to the end of the page body. We're going to add it before the closing body tag in our default page layout with a script element. So we're going to grab this script element, and we're going to bring it over to our code editor. And we're going to put it in here at the end of the body. All right, there it is. And finally, we're going to add the USWDS elements markup to that page body as well. So instead of copying 93 lines of code from the USWDS website, we're going to add one simple line of markup, USA banner opening and closing tags, to our default layout. So here it is. Grab that, bring it back here, paste it in, save, and come back to our site. Okay, now when we save and we scroll to the top of the page, we cross our fingers, we're going to see the new banner. There it is. And that is all it takes to install the banner using USWDS elements on a site. There we have it. So, slide 81. USWDS Elements is going to be a great addition to the design system. For many project teams, we expect to see reduced project maintenance costs, reduced upgrade burden, reduced compliance burden, improved project velocity, and improved mission focus. Slide 82. And as I mentioned earlier, not only are we aiming to launch USWDS Elements this spring, but we're going to be doing this alongside our existing code base. As we make USWDS easier, we're not going to be doing this at the expense of existing users, and we'll continue to support how teams might use USWDS now. We'll be renaming our existing code base USWDS Core, but USWDS Core and USWDS Elements are designed to work together. Slide 83. So as we move forward, our current USWDS 3 codebase will become USWDS Core 4.0 and beyond. Slide 84. So who's USWDS Core best for? We expect that the USWDS Core version of our components is going to be best for teams with a mature design practice, teams with existing USWDS implementations, teams that need more customization, and teams that want to build new things. Slide 85. 2025 is shaping up to be a big year for USWDS, delivering a design system with more options, one that's easier to install and easier to stay up to date with over time. Slide 86. So onward we go. I encourage folks watching to keep in touch with the design system from month to month. There's a lot going on. Come to our website at designsystem.digital.gov to sign up for our newsletter and view past monthly calls, and stay connected with Digitalgov to register and attend USWDS monthly calls on the third Thursday of every month. Slide 87. Thank you.